On the internet I have seen a lot of criticism aimed at the Canon EOS R and the 5D Mark IV, mainly aimed at the crop factor and how that they can't shoot 4K full frame. But this has got me thinking, I wonder why that's the case, because people are saying that Canon have deliberately crippled these cameras, but that doesn't make sense. Why would Canon deliberately make a camera worse? As far as I'm concerned, there is only one Canon camera that can shoot in 4K full frame, and that is the C700 FF. And that's £28,000 not including VAT. I really don't think that Canon is worried about people nearly buying a C700 FF and then realising that they can save £26,000 by buying an EOS R. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think Canon thinks that's going to happen either. So I've been doing some research to try and get to the bottom of this, and I think I have found the answer. In the past, about 5 years ago, what cameras used to do is they would take the readout from a sensor, but they wouldn't supply the camera's internal processor with the entire readout of the sensor. They would use line skipping and pixel bending to reduce the resolution of the sensor readout to something more manageable for the camera to be able to process and then write to the SD card. This was great for giving the camera an easy image to process, but it wasn't great for the image quality because it would introduce lots of sensor artifacts like aliasing and moire. Recently, this has become a lot less of an issue because what cameras have started doing is they've started downsampling the image in the processing stage. Basically, the cameras take the full sensor readout and then the processor downsamples the image using lots of complex stuff that I don't really understand, and then they take that final image and write it to the SD or the CF card. And I think this is why we don't have a camera that can shoot in 4K full frame. Trying to process that much data would use too much battery life and it would generate too much heat. These cameras can do 1080p in full frame because I imagine this uses a lot less processing power going to a resolution that's 4 times smaller. But the technology is now moving on to 4K, you can't keep putting out 1080p cameras. So Canon's solution to this is to use less of the sensor. By using less of a sensor, you have a lower resolution sensor readout which is easier to process, and the camera is able to process this lower resolution and write it to the card. Or whatever the resolution of the video that's being recorded, Canon can just crop in on the sensor until the sensor resolution matches exactly the resolution of the video file. That means way less processing because you don't need to reduce the number of pixels, you just need to process the sensor readout into a more compressed video file. And I should point out, this is how red cinema cameras work. If you want to shoot at a lower resolution than the sensor can handle, then the sensor crops in, so you get a higher crop factor if you record in a lower resolution. And you don't see many people complaining about the crop factor of a red. So that's why Canon doesn't shoot in 4K full frame. But that leaves a question unanswered, which is how come Sony can shoot 4K full frame? Well, they can't, at least reliably. If you look on the internet, there are all sorts of reported issues about Sony's overheating and shutting themselves down, or at the very least throwing up a warning icon. The A6300 had lots of issues with overheating. There were lots of people saying that after 15 minutes the camera would just shut itself down and stop recording. It was something to do with thermal safeguards and limitations. But luckily, Sony fixed this with the A6500 by bypassing all the thermal safeguards and limitations. And it's not just the crop censored Sony cameras as well, even the full frame cameras like the A7S and A7R series, they have overheating problems as well. I'm not trying to say that every Sony full frame camera overheats, but there are a lot more reports of problem with Sony cameras than there are with Canon cameras. Now I appreciate that if you're just shooting promo videos, you're only shooting 2 minutes at a time, this isn't really a problem for you, and if that's the case then yeah, you'll be fine with Sony full frame 4K. But if you look at the different design philosophies of Sony and Canon, Sony wants to give you all of the specs possible. Canon on the other hand is more conservative. Canon likes to make cameras that are reliable and dependable, and no matter how unlikely the situation is, a camera that will randomly turn itself off after an hour of shooting is not reliable or dependable. Sony cameras also have less battery life than Canon cameras, and they do get hot to the touch, or at least warm to the touch. If the camera is starting to get hot, then that means that the sensor is also getting hot too, and a hot sensor is not good for low light performance. My dad has a Canon 600D that has been modified specifically for astro imaging. If you're filming the night sky where a lot of things are black, you really need low noise. So what this camera has is a massive liquid cooler on the back of it. The camera is basically one giant liquid cooling system with a sensor on the front to get low noise. And Sony's are known for having good high ISO performance, but your low light performance will get a lot worse if the sensor gets too hot. All of the Canon cameras that are designed for professional video, such as the XC series and the Cinema series, they all have cooling solutions. Even my XC10 has an air intake and an air exhaust with a big fan in the middle, and that's the same system that all of the cinema cameras use. Canon does not want its cameras to overheat. Ever. If I had the opportunity to go and film something amazing where it was a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity and I could only take one camera, then depending on the requirements and the budget, it would either be a Canon or an Arri. I think that one day Canon will make a DSLR or a mirrorless camera that is capable of 4K full frame, but it will not do it until the technology is there and it's going to be 100% reliable. So either we need processors that are more powerful without getting as hot, or small compact cooling systems. But for now, if you go with a Canon camera, yes, you might be sacrificing 4K full frame, but you are getting a lot more peace of mind with the added reliability. If you found this video useful, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing so as not to miss any new videos. See you later.